At least somebody got it. Hi, everybody. It's been a while. Was I here last month? Was I? Because I skipped a month. I don't remember. It was a month before that? Okay. So if I'm counting properly, and I very well may not be, this is class 5? Maybe? Yeah. But we kind of got robbed there because we had... Huh? You still can't hear? Okay. Let's see. Audio. Yeah, well, that only works sketchy at best here. Does that pull out? Let's see. I know there was a... these mics still work. Who was it that taught me that last time? Somebody taught me that last time that these mics are still working well. Ah, there we go. Get it away from that one. Let me turn the audio off here. Okay, maybe that'll be better. Stop it. Point that thing at you. Kill me. I'll move this one back over then, and I'll just lean over all night long because somebody's too lazy to get up and sit in the front. Okay. So anyway, I think this is class 5, but don't quote me. If you go back and listen to the recording and it pans out that this is like 4 or 6 or something, then, get over it, right? Okay, so the last couple months that we've taught, we've been cut kind of short, right? We had Paul and Kim 1 month, and we got cut short there. And then who was it that cut us short last time? It was Bob Ward cut us short last time. And so we're going to have a full-size class tonight because nobody cares about Brian any more than they care about me. So, we're all good. Tonight I thought I would try to concentrate my discussion in 2 areas. And depending on who you are, this first area will be well named. I'm calling it tricky restores. Like I said, depends on who you are, right? I don't think they're all that tricky, but quite a few people do. In fact, every DBA I've interviewed for the last several years doesn't know how to do any of these. So they're tricky for somebody, right? And then the second topic I would like to get into managing backup collections if we have time. So by tricky restores, first of all, we're going to talk about restoring system databases. And how many of you guys can tell me definitively 100% without a doubt that you know exactly how to restore master? 1. Okay, there you go. 2. But it was a slow hand that went up there. I didn't do it. Oh, I see. So restoring master really isn't that difficult. What I've got here, and I want to be able to prove to you that we did it, right? Is I've got a database here that says gets deleted by mistake, right? So we're gonna do that. First, I'm gonna back this up just to make sure that the backup I have on disk is the one I really want. Now, just as kind of a review. Hey, I was like, somebody's hollering at me. So just kind of as a review, what are init and format? For those of you guys who have hung on my every word throughout all of these classes. This was class 1. Let's talk about init first. What is the init flag? No. It overwrites the file. Right? If you don't use init, then it will keep appending the backups to the same file. And when you go to restore, you'll have to say file equals 1, file equals 7, file equals 19, right? And have this one big, huge 200,000 gig file on there with all of your backups and log backups in it, right? So we don't want to do that. And format is the one that rewrites your header, okay? And remember, you have to have that because if you do something silly like change the number of files that you're backing up to, if you go from like 1 to 10 or from 10 to 15 or from 10 to 2 and you don't use format, then it gets formatted for that number of files and your backup's going to fail. So just go ahead and do that. And plus, if something happens to your server in the interim, like during your backup and the header gets corrupt, even if you use init and it overwrites that file, because it doesn't delete the file and recreate it, it just overwrites it, but it leaves the header intact, right? It just overwrites the info in the header. But if the header's corrupt, then it can't write that info to the header, and your backup fails with some really odd error message that I wish I had saved when I got it. But that kind of thing's really hard to reproduce. So anyway, always use init, always use format. Okay, so now restoring master. So I'm going to go ahead and accidentally delete this. You notice how I'm going to whoosy-fraz. Detach, that's the word I'm looking for. So I detached it. It is no longer there. There we go, it's gone. So to restore master is really, really simple. It's just like any other restore command, except you have to start the server in single user mode. Not that hard, right? So there are a couple ways to do this. If you look at MSDN, MSDN tells you to use SQL command at the command prompt. Sure, that's but you can also use this way. The thing you gotta realize when you're doing it this way is you can connect here, or you can connect here, but you can't do both because it's single user mode, right? So quite often when you bring up SMS after you start SQL in single user mode, the first thing it does, it pops up and says, what server do you want to connect to? And you say, oh, well, I want to connect to the local server. I want to connect to this server. And you hit OK, and it brings up everything over here, and it connects to it, and then you try to open up a new query window, and you can't because you're in single user mode. Yes? I can try tools, options. Let's see. Size 10. 14, would that do you? There we go. Is that better? All right. Wow. I've got a. Oh, hey man. I've got a crowd full of old people tonight. That was for the folks on the recording. Okay, so.
We're not old. We're seasoned.
Yes. No. I sprinkled pepper in my hair before I got here. I'm seasoned. You're old. Okay, so the easiest way to do that, and I'll show you a couple different ways to bang this out, right? So the easiest way to do this is to come down here, stop the service. Okay, quick. What do I have to do to start in single user mode? Minus what?
Minus
F, as in Frank? No.
I think minus M.
Minus M, right. Which is perfect because single user mode minus M. I always think it means mode. I mean, that's the only way I was ever able to remember it because minus S doesn't work, right? So I always, oh, you have to put it in mode. I don't know. So anyway, you put minus M, you start it. There we go. Now, with any luck, this was disconnected, and I should be able to connect with this guy. There we go. Hey, what do you know? Now all you got to do is restore it with replace, and you're done. And after you do that, it's going to shut down the service again, automatically. So then you come in here. If I refresh that, it should be turned off. Oh. Should have. Oh yeah, it did. You take out the flag, start it up again, and you're golden. And we should have our database back in there, right? Because remember I detached that database? And gets deleted by mistake, is back. Okay? That's really a lot easier than people make it. I'll show you the command line version just for completion, right? So, stop SQL. Oh, that is net stop, not set stop. I was like, what do you mean you don't want to stop? Okay, now, what am I doing? I'm starting it in single user mode. This time it's a -m, or a /m. There we go. There we go. Now I go secret command. Good. Now I just enter in my restore statement. And it's done. Go back up to net stop. Net start. And we're back. Anybody want to see it in PowerShell? No, not really. This is actually one of the few things that's longer in PowerShell. Because to stop the service and all that, right, you have to filter out the service and all that, and it's actually easier to do it here. But you could run these commands directly in PowerShell and you'd be just fine. Now, this method is fine, but I don't really like it that much. Can anybody tell me what the problems might be with this? I mean, not only do you have, are you inside SQL command and everything, you don't have full access to querying things nicely and any of that stuff, right? Because it doesn't put things in columns, it just spits it out like this if you want to query anything. But what could possibly be the other problem?
It could be your master. There's no GUI.
Yeah. What was that you said?
I said it could be your master. It could be your master. But if your master is messed up, not you just lost one, you might have lost your master.
Right.
You got to do something. I lost the master.
Okay, so that's not really a problem with doing it in SMS versus DOS.
When you start the server in single user mode, someone can connect to your database, so you will not be able to.
Well, somebody can do that anyway, even if I do it in SMS, right? Okay. I'm sorry? Syntax calling. Okay, well, that could be one of them, right? But I'm thinking of two things, right? First and foremost, stopping a service in command line mode can be a lot harder or a lot longer because certain transactions may have to roll back for a long time, and I prefer shutdown with no wait, bam, right? That I do very nicely from here, right? I love that a lot more. Just bam, when I want to shut down the server, I want to shut down the server, right? So that, and if I put everything on C just to make sure that it's nice and short and everything, right? But if it's not, and you have to type everything like that with no real good word wrapping or no really good syntax coloring or no real good completion, right? Then, and I mean, just looking at this straight text in here, it may be harder to find your mistake, right? So, and you can have this done up ahead of time like I did here, right? Whereas I'd have to put it in like a batch file or something if I wanted to do this in DOS. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but like Tim so eloquently said, there's no GUI. And you know how I advocate doing everything backup and restore in a GUI. So that's the master database. It's not really any big deal. Now, let's say, and you brought up a good point, let's say that you lose the entire master. You're keeping master on a drive that's not your system partition, right? So Windows is still around, but you've got it like on the D drive, and the D drive goes away. And maybe it's even separated from the SQL install files itself, right? I mean, I'm really narrowing it down to get down. But for some reason, bad sectors on the disk or something, but those files, you just can't get to those files anymore, right? Okay, go. What do? We can't even do a replace because we can't get SQL started at all. Right? Because master's just not there. The files are so corrupt, they're just not there. How do you solve that problem?
Reinstall.
Yeah, I like that. Reinstall for you guys at home.
Reinstall before. Recreate master. Give it a blank master.
Right, so rebuild. Right, you can certainly rebuild master, right? You run setup again with the rebuild master, and then absolutely you can do that.
And then do the restore.
Anybody come up with anything, I don't know,
That's the way I do it.
easier?
Do you have a hack?
The DAC? Well, you can't start SQL because master is corrupt. How are you going to connect with a DAC if you can't even start the service?
Do you just have a .back, or do you actually have
Yeah, you can have a dot back, sure.
I'm just saying if you had the actual copies of it.
Nope, all I got is a dot back. But you're on the right track.
You can just copy an NDF and LDF of master from a different server and then restore the backup.
That man wins a book. I got books down here I forgot to tell you all about. Here you go. You get your choice. Absolutely. So there are two ways you can handle that specific scenario, right? You can go to another server that has the same version, and you can steal its MDF and LDF files and put them out there. And none of the databases will be right. Nothing will be right in master, but you will be able to start the server long enough to restore it to what you want it to be, right? A second option, and this is the one I kind of like best because it just puts everything right as rain to begin with, right? Is you take your .back file, restore it as a database under another name on the same version on a different server, and then copy those files over to your server and then start your instance, right? That's the best way to do that. Yeah, you can rebuild if you want, if you don't have any other options, but almost every other option you have is going to be easier than that, right? So there you go. Now, moving on to I did that. Moving on to MSDB. Who knows the trick to restoring MSDB? Because I'll be honest with you, I've only had to restore MSDB like once in my entire life. It's actually not. Restoring MSDB is actually much easier. There's one of two things you need to do. You either need to turn off the SQL agent so that it's not trying to hit MSDB, because all you need is exclusive access, right? Or you can turn on, you can start the service with trace flag 3608. 3608 does what? No, it doesn't turn off agent. It only starts it starts SQL in a minimal config, in that the only system database it starts is master. So you get the same basic thing, right? It'll be offline, so you can restore it, or you can just turn off the agent, right? So if you do it, let me see what's running here. I don't have the agent on, so I'll turn on the agent here real quick. Here it is. I'm going to back that up just to make sure. I'm using init and format. I'm going to restore with replace. I believe that should be done by now. And let's see if we can restore MSDB. Now MSDB isn't very big. Why is this taking so long? Yeah, it's waiting for a timeout. Yeah. Okay, so while we're waiting, what's in it in format? Overwrite is right. And what's trace flag 3608? Yeah, only start master. That's a better way to say that. Okay, there. See, exclusive access couldn't be obtained. So now we simply just turn it off. Yeah. And once it's turned off, we should be able to restore it just fine.
Now you're doing all this as though you have a backup of the databases you need. What if you don't have those backups? Is that where you go in and you have to do the rebuild master?
Guys, everybody, what happens if you need to restore a database and you don't have a backup?
You work on your resume.
Exactly.
So that is the plan update resume?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got a ton of jobs in there that are specific to that server and you're going to be screwed if you can't restore it and you don't have backups, then you've reached the first part of that sentence where you're screwed. Absolutely. you can follow the same advice you did for master, right? And you can get it from another server and all that good stuff, right? But that's not going to replace all those intricate jobs and all of that. I mean, you're done for, right?
Because what's the impact on your sys packages too? Are they?
Yeah.
They're stored in
Yeah.
MSDB.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Unless you save those
File system, right?
UTXs.
You can distribute, you can.
Even then, the metadata won't be in MSDB. But you'll at least have the logic, right? You'll at least have the IP that's contained in the packages, but you'll have to enter them back in, yeah.
Redeploy them.
Yes. So, there you go. And I would show you 3608, but it looks the exact same as -M. You just start it with T 3608, and there you go. But that brings up another point that somebody brought up another point a few minutes ago that I forgot to come back to. And this isn't part of the presentation, so I'm going to fold my hands so I keep my hands off my computer. What happens if you can't get exclusive access to your server? So let's say, for example, that you're trying to start your server in single user mode and something keeps connecting before you. Because there's only so fast you can go with start and then run over there real quick and keep hitting connect until you actually do, right? And there are some services out there, and I've played that game plenty of times, right? You're trying to beat something out there that keeps doing it. So how can you get around that?
Are you talking like the DAC or something?
I'm saying that there's a service out there that maybe keeps pulling your SQL box. An excellent example of this is clusters, right? Really hard to connect to single user mode in a cluster because the heartbeat keeps beating you to it, right?
Well, not all the services.
I'm sorry?
Not all the services.
A rough way is to kill everything but direct memory access, and then just do it from the box, remote desktop into the box.
That's the hard way. Sure.
My way was harder, actually.
That way was basically kill all the protocols except shared memory.
Right.
Okay.
And then do it, and then remote desktop or log in locally.
Right. Well, that's certainly a way. Anybody else?
Cluster administrator and take that node.
Well, we're not. That was just an example. Cluster was just an example.
Another trace flag in the
I'll take that away from you and say, what if it's an external service like business objects, BOE, right, that keeps pulling it for something or something like that, right? Just some application vendor is hitting your thing and they've got to keep alive there to make sure that the database is always going to be there. And so every 5 seconds it pulls and you don't have time to, and it always beats you to that single user mode. Go ahead.
Start up your service with a different port.
That's another way to handle it.
disable all the logins but yours.
That's you're actually getting better. What?
Well, would that work?
I see.
I was actually going to suggest.
And if you're in front of the console, you're golden.
Yeah.
But when's the last time you were in the same room with your SQL box?
This morning.
My current ones, I've been at my gig for a year now, and I've never even seen my servers.
Downside is that does not allow that does not prevent services on that block.
Right, exactly. So you're getting closer. He said disable all the logins but yours. That's getting closer.
You can create a logon trigger that kicks everybody else but you.
Now you're getting it. Yes. It's a really good idea when you're doing stuff like this to just keep a logon trigger there. Right? Disabled. And it is me only access. Right? And if I ever need to kick everybody out and be the only one there, boom. I can turn on that login trigger and it will refuse every connection but mine. And you can do the same thing if we go back even further, right? You can do the same thing with the cluster service. Now, another good way to do that is just increase the time between heartbeats, and that'll give you plenty of time to go in there, right, into cluster config, right? You can keep that login trigger there, and it'll even keep them out. It'll even keep the heartbeat out long enough for you to connect and do your thing. So, especially if you say either my account only or only through Management Studio or whatever, right? I mean, you've got all kinds of options. You've got yourself a little built-in firewall there that you can keep your devs from connecting You can keep your users from connecting with Management Studio or Access or Excel or any of those things. You can put all that stuff in a logon trigger, and unless the application name is this, roll back, and it'll just kick them right back out of the system. And that way, on your really sensitive systems, especially when the auditors come in and they say, how can you prove to me that users are only accessing this database through the front end as it was intended and not making changes on the back end? Well, here, we've got a login trigger that disallows anything except that, except for the DBAs who have to connect on the back end. And there you go. And you can prove it. I'm getting a little off topic, but anyway, it's still relevant, right?
How about you?
I'm sorry?
So that's you. You always get on top.
Not always. Okay.
All right, thank you.
How about model? What, the... Yes, it is, actually. Okay, go for it. How about model? Who knows how to restore model? Other than reading the little thing there. And yeah, it's no different than you don't have to do anything special for model. I would imagine that if somebody else were creating a database at the exact same time and we're taking up that, you might be delayed a little bit while obtaining exclusive access, but
Couldn't you just get model from anywhere?
and you can just get it from anywhere. Absolutely. Well, I would go from the same version, but yeah, absolutely. So nobody wants to see that, do they? I mean, I put it in there just in case. Actually, I was just bragging that I still remember the syntax, but okay. Restore header only. Since we were talking about headers a few minutes ago, I actually forgot this was in here. Yes? I am so glad you brought that up because I meant to talk about that and forgot to put it in my notes. So the question was, what about the resource database? Okay, so what about the resource database? How do you back up and restore the resource database, guys? I know Brian knows. I can see it in his eyes. Because the problem is you don't have access to the resource database, right, in sys databases, so you can't really write a backup command to backup resource DB, right? It won't work. It doesn't even see it. And SQL holds a lock on files, so in order to get the files to even copy, the MDF and the LDF to even copy, you'd have to turn off SQL to release the lock in order to do that, right? As it turns out, SQL does not hold a lock on those files. So what I suggest is that you get what I call a resource DB store. Okay? You take a spot on your network, because you don't need a resource DB from that server. You need one from that version, right? Because the resource DB for any version is going to be the same across the board. There are no customizations you can make, right? You can't add code to it. So pick yourself a folder out there on the network somewhere. Whenever you upgrade a database to a new version, take that new copy of resource DB and copy those files into a subfolder there with whatever moniker you need to identify it appropriately, right? And then when anything in your entire LAN needs a new resource DB for whatever reason, which has never happened to me, then you can just take it from your centralized store and drag it over there. And now you could get it from another server too, but now you're on the server hunt, right? Which one has the exact version I'm looking for?
Does it need to go down to the hotfix level? I'm sorry. Does it need to go down to the hotfix level?
Yes.
By build number, exactly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Can you just use like your development database on your laptop, turn it off and copy it? Use it?
Well, you don't even have to turn it off and copy it.
Or you just copy
Yeah. If it's the same resource number, yes. Okay. So and like he asked, yes, it goes all the way down to the build. Maybe you can get away with some subtle thing, but I wouldn't try. They little subtleties in there, right? I would stick with the exact build number myself. Like I said, I've never experimented with that, but you could run just fine for 2 months and then hit some little obscure thing in there you've never hit before, and then all of a sudden things start to tank. I don't know. But I wouldn't try it. But yeah, that's a really good idea, just to have a centralized location to keep all of your, and you don't have to keep recopying them and recopying them and recopying them and recopying, right? You can keep it in the same place that you keep all of your TDE certificate backups, right? Okay, anything else before we get into header only? I don't have any code for that. I'm going to have to write it real quick. Do this right here. Okay. There's a lot of really good information in here. Some of it we're going to skip, and I hope I remember next month in enough time to code up some of this stuff, because I think it's really cool for you guys to see. But there's a lot of really good information in here, starting off with the backup type, right? Everybody doesn't use .back and TRN, right? So it's a good idea to know what kind of, and a lot of people use .back even for diffs too. So it's a good idea to know what kind of backup it is even, right? The expiration date, compressed, sure, why not? That doesn't really do you all that kind of good. It doesn't do you that much good. What server it was originally on, that can really kind of help. You know, I've had that before, where what server did this even come from to begin with? Where does it belong? You have to know what version to restore SQL to. So you're going to get to that here in a minute. Where you get to the compatibility. There you go. Software ID, software version build, all this stuff, right? So this is the stuff that you're going to need to know when you say, well, what version of SQL did this backup even come from? So you can save yourself a lot of time if you've got a very large backup, and you know, because remember, you can only restore equal or up, right? Depends on which way I'm going, but I'm going from the file, right? So you can restore on a higher version, but not on a lower version, right? And it'll automatically upgrade. So knowing this stuff is really essential. Yes?
Except for the one edge case, between 2008 and 2008.
Okay, so what did I skip when I was doing? Backup start date, backup finish date. Sure, that's useful to know. Now, okay, but that is a good question. Why would we need to know the backup start date and the backup finish date when it's sitting out there on the file system and it has create date and last modified date and stuff anyway? It's a lie.
Because you can move it to a different server and create date and file date to change.
Exactly. If you move it to a different server, and depending on how you transfer it, depends on whether or not those properties are going to be changed. So yeah, absolutely. So it's a good idea to contain that stuff in here anyway, right?
Change time zone. Right?
Only a copy on the same volume will retain.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Only a copy on the same volume will retain. If you do a move or a copy to a different volume, it will inherit the current time.
And first LSN, last LSN, these are pretty important, right? Especially when you're trying to find a log chain. Machine name, yeah, we've already gone over that. Recovery fork ID, that's one of the things I hope to get into next time, because it's a really involved topic. It seems really nice and sweet, but it's not, because you got one of my favorite words in it, fork, right? But it's okay. So has bulk log data? Sure, I could see that as being very useful. Is a snapshot, is read only, so it just gives you the overall status of the database. Now, is force offline? Anybody have any idea what that would mean?
As soon as you restore it, try to take it offline.
Did you raise your hand? I thought you did. Oh, okay. Okay, so is force offline means that when this backed up, this was the final backup, and a backup that we call an offline backup. So the database was taken offline as a result of this backup. Any guesses on when that would ever happen?
Well, it should be.
Tail. Very good. Who said that? All right, you want a book? Okay, good. I'll get your book. Yes, when you're backing up the tail of the log and you're going to restore it to the same server, you have to the tail of the log backup, if you do it with no recovery, if you back up the log with no recovery, will take the database in offline mode. I don't know why it doesn't say with offline, but anyway. And so it can be useful to know that this was the tail of the backup. Is copy only? Why does it matter if this is a copy only backup? What does copy only mean? Okay, didn't break what chain? Nope.
It didn't reset the chain?
I'm sorry?
It didn't reset the chain, or how that works, where you, whatever it is, where you can go back to that backup by going forward. It doesn't actually incur a real backup in the middle, so you can't start there and then go forward with transaction logs. Is that right?
No. Anybody else? No, that's not true. That's not true. Go ahead.
Copy on the backup, basically you can take it anytime and it doesn't mess up with your systematic backup plan that you have, where you take your full differential and log backups.
So which one of those does it help with? I mean, what does it not do?
It doesn't.
Okay, you guys are painful. It doesn't clear the DCM, the differential change map. Okay, when you take a full backup, because full backups don't do anything for log backups, right? I mean, you can restore logs through full backups, right? So that wouldn't matter. But every time you take a full backup, it resets the differential bitmaps in there that tell it that it's got that tell it, bam, this is a full. You don't need these differentials before, right? So you can't restore diffs through a full backup, right? Because it clears the DCM, and that's why. And diffs don't, which is why diffs are cumulative, because they don't clear the change map every single time, right? So this right here says take a backup, but leave the DCM intact, so that I can continue doing fulls. I just want to restore this to a dev system or something, but I don't want to break my chain. So you guys were all dancing around it, right? You just didn't know exactly what it does. But it's good to know exactly what it does, because if you're under the impression that it does something for your logs, then you're going to be in trouble when you go to do a diff and go, but I did a copy only. You know, that only affects the logs, right? So you should know these things. So it could be important to know that this is a copy-only backup. Recovery fork ID, that goes along with the same thing we were talking about before. Some more stuff here. The recovery model, backup set good, whatnot. Compressed backup size, good stuff. So there you go. That's the header only. A lot of really good information in there that people skip a lot of times. And it's good to know that a lot of that stuff is in there. You can get a lot of information about the system itself and the backups just by looking at the header, right? And the file list. We look at the file list mostly, but okay, let's see.
Taking a daily backup of 4-hour diffs, you delete the first diff and you create the second one, or should you?
Yeah, you can. Depends on what your recoverability needs are. The question was if you're taking a full backup and then diffs every hour, right? Then can you delete those first ones or overwrite those first ones as you do the second ones? Yeah, you can, absolutely. As long as you're guaranteed that you only want the last diff. If you're doing logs in between, and you have a failure before that next diff, and you've deleted everything, well, then you go back to your last full, right? And maybe whatever logs you have. But that kind of defeats the purpose of taking diffs too, right? So keep them until you definitely don't need them anymore. Okay, now we're going to get into another type of difficult restore, or what I'm calling tricky restores, right? And this is what we call hack attack database restore. And this one's just fun, okay? So the scenario is simple. And this is an actual call I got a few months ago, but it happens this way in one way or another to all types of people. We've got a table that we need restored, a single table we need restored in the database. The database wasn't big, right? But you can't do that, so I have to restore the full database. We'll look on there, and this isn't a database I've ever managed before, so there are no full backups. The only thing they're doing is some third-party thing that copies the files themselves and puts them on the tape. So I get a hold of the tape guy and say, hey, I need these files pulled off the tape. Pulls these files and puts them off, and pulls the MDF and the LDF and puts them on the drive for me. I go to attach them. They won't attach. Okay? The problem with a lot of those tools is they don't take much into account. All they do is copy the files, and whatever state they're in, right? So this one just happens to have the log out of congruence with the data file, so you can't attach it. And here, if I try to attach it, should blow up on me. Blam. Right? The log scan number failed to pass the log scan is not valid, right? So we can't attach this database. Now, another scenario where you get this, and this is more common. You come into work one morning, or you come back from lunch, and you either get a call from a user or you start looking at the server yourself, and you notice that you're in suspect. And quite often, the first reaction of a DBA when they see this is to do what? To detach it and try to reattach it in a better state, right? Maybe if it just had a little vacation, it would be all right. Yeah. Okay? The problem is once you detach it, you lose any ability to fix it at all, right? Because it's not attached to the database, and you can't do it. Now, what are some ways that we can do this? We've got our detached database, and you just saw me try to attach it again. It didn't attach. And by the way, that's when you're going to get it, right? Even if you're a smart DBA, and you know better than that, you're not the first one to discover this, right? Who discovered this database was in suspect? Some application admin who knows just enough SQL to be able to detach a database and keep you from being able to do anything with it, right? And when he tried to reattach it, it didn't reattach. And that's when your phone rang. Because now you're worth getting in contact with.
And he's working on his resume.
No. He's still got a DBA to fall back on. So, we were talking about being able to find information out of the file, right? Bam. You can't do anything. You got nothing. Right? You are totally screwed. You can't do anything. Nothing. So, here's how you get away from this. And it's very, very simple. You just got to know the trick, right? You start by creating a dummy database with the same files, right? So you create your dummy database. Now, ordinarily we say dummy database because it's just there as a placeholder until you can do something better with it, right? But I think here it's better named after the guy that screwed this up to begin with. So we create our dummy database. Yeah. So you notice how, and it's the same files that I have on the C drive. Okay, these are exactly what these files are named on the C drive. Because you want this database to have the same file names in sys databases. That's the important part, is get an entry that points to those files in the master database. Right? Or you can create something different here. I'll show you here in a sec. Because either way, you have to have these files the same. Am I making that clear?
So it's HTTPN is the name of the database up above.
Right. Actually, I'll show you that in a second because I misspoke a little bit. Up top, they're HTTPN PMA. Okay? So I'm creating these guys with this, and I've got my dummy database right here. HTTPN right there, right? Now I set this database offline. Now I've got to go to the C drive. You notice I like really short paths, right? I said go to the C drive. There we are. And now I have to rename my old files to these new files. Right? So I take these guys, and these are my original database files that wouldn't attach, right? So now I rename those to these. And then I come back in and I set it back on the line. What's going to happen when I set this back on the line?
It's going to go back into suspect mode.
Exactly. But what have I achieved?
You've now got that back to a place where you can at least do something stupid.
Exactly. Now I've got it in suspect. And which is about the time that now you get a call from your user going, we're right back where we started, man. I thought you were a DBA. Yeah, it took me 10 minutes to get us back where we started. Okay, so
Take over. Feel free.
at this point you can go a couple routes. Start first by putting it in emergency. Now I want all my databases in emergency mode. The red icons are just prettier. So now we've got it in emergency. What can we do with it now that we've got it into emergency mode?
You can copy the data out into another DB if you like.
Absolutely. You've seen my video on this, haven't you?
Well, it says it right there.
Oh, does it? Ah, fine. Don't get ahead of the story.
Suddenly you thought I was right.
Well, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, I do have a video on this on Midnight DBA. So if you're not following along very well, or if you want to memorize the steps, I've got a video on there. I think it's called Hack Attack DB or Rebuild Log, something like that, right? Don't you like it when I say or something like that? Because then you'll never find it. So we've got it in emergency, and he's right. You can copy the data out and put it in another database if you like. If it's not too big, I would actually advise that, because now you're going to make sure that the new structure is nice and solid, right? But assuming it's too big and you can't do that, and I'm going to say, and assuming you can't lose any data, right? Now, how can we, and this is a good question, how can we recover the rest of this database, get it out of emergency and actually get it online without losing any data? Because the problem is the log is out of congruence with the data file, right? But there are probably transactions, and I would say since they're out of whack that this is likely, right? There are transactions in there that haven't made it to the data file, and for some reason can't be rolled back, can't be rolled forward, right? So it can't run through recovery. So without it being able to run through recovery, how can we get it to run through recovery and and not lose those transactions that are in there? No. Anybody? Come on, we got some DBAs in here. I'm sorry? No. I like where you're going with that, but no.
Back up what you got.
How many people have interviewed with me? Oh yeah. So, what is one of my favorite phrases? Sometimes the answer is
Sexual harassment.
yes, sometimes the answer is sexual harassment. Sometimes the answer is no. Right? And it's for those of us who don't listen to that the sexual harassment comes in. But sometimes the answer is no. You're going to lose that log data. It's called the cost of being stupid. Right? You can't get that back. Okay?
Are there not third-party tools that you can go in?
And mine the log and all of that. With the state the log's in, I don't know.
How big is the log? That would be my first question. How big is the log?
Does it matter? How big is it or how full is it?
Well, how full is it?
Oh,
Third-party tools can tell you this.
maybe. But if I couldn't even pull header info, I don't know if there's anything out there that might be, some obscure tool out there that might be able to do it. But if I don't know about it, then it's not going to be a tool to me right here, right? And I may not have something like that would probably be pretty expensive. So, You've just learned the cost of being stupid, right? You lose a few transactions to get your entire database back. I would say all but the smallest part of the world's population would consider that a win, right?
Well, isn't that small part? Isn't they're your boss?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know. Okay, then, we lost on this one. Delete the files. You're right. We lost. Then we can't have any of it back. Delete all 70 gigs of the files and let's start over. Or we can lose like the last 10 or 15 minutes. Which one of those is a win to you? Right? So, anyway. So at this point, you can get it back. You just can't get the transactions back, right? You can rebuild the log, alter database, rebuild log, give it a new log file name, one that's not the log file name now, right? This one's going to fail. Any idea why this might fail? Well, I mean, it will fail, but can anybody think of any reason why something like this might fail? This is a tricky one. I don't expect anybody to get it. No. Yeah, I know, right? So yes, this was a 2000 database, and I can't upgrade it at the same time as I'm trying to pull it out of suspect. Right? Some of you guys, man, y'all are really good at reading ahead, and others just kind of put on their blinders. It's got to be blinders this way, right? I was going to say blinders. It's got to be blinders that way. Oh, well, you know. But this is a good method. But here, I'll show you the error message you get when you try to do this. There we go. Can't be upgraded. So yeah, it's trying to upgrade to R2 from a 2000. And you just can't do that when you're trying to get the database solid, right? So if you want to see it work, go to the video on Midnight DBA. It's actually done against the 2000 box there, and it actually works. It's actually done on the server. I actually documented that as I was doing it. So yeah, I do that sometimes. So I was gonna do another one tonight, but I was afraid I would run out of time, so I didn't. I think my time's about up, isn't it? I got till 7:20. Okay, good. Well, I'm not going to code that example now, but I did want to talk about, and the coding portion of this is over, right? I do want to talk about managing backup information, because this is something that so many people are just thrown in the middle of. How do you take backup information like missed backups and failed backups and succeeded backups and all of that stuff across your 5 and 6 and 7 and 1,500 and 2,000 servers or 20 servers? It doesn't matter, right? And get that information that you need about, this backup failed. And it's more than just passed or failed, right? This backup has been running 2 hours longer than it usually does, or this backup didn't even kick off at all, which is completely different from a failure, right? If you're only monitoring passed and failed, or only monitoring failed, then you could have backups that didn't kick off at all. Why don't backups kick off? They kicked off every other day. Why didn't they kick off today? That would be a failure. Somebody shut off the SQL agent. That is almost 100% of the time the problem, is somebody or something shut off the agent and you didn't know about it. I mean, that happened to me just a few months ago on a box that we were only kind of monitoring. I mean, but the agent had been off for 3 or 4 weeks and we never noticed. Right? And come to find out, they go, oh yeah, we turned that off for something, and I guess we just forgot to turn it back on. Well, okay. Can I take a backup now? So yeah, that's the biggest thing. So how do you manage all of this stuff? How do you guys? I want to hear from y'all, because how do y'all manage this information? What do y'all do? Yeah.
I have a job that pulls each of the instances from the list on a daily basis to find out if there's any backups that have been taken in the last 24 hours. It also provides the air logs to parts of the
Okay. And how do you? What's the underpinnings of that?
basically, that's his job on.
Okay. Okay, so he's got an SIS job that goes out and pulls everybody. Anybody else?
I have a question.
He has a question. This is the statement portion of the class. No, go ahead.
How about here, let's say we have a table which has been didn't back up last 2 hours. We can't afford to lose those transactions.
Oh, you mean here?
That particular scenario.
In this particular scenario. So, in this scenario that's on the board right now, you haven't backed up in a couple hours, and you can't afford to lose those transactions. Guys? Sometimes the answer is no. Okay? Let me ask you a question. You've got the same scenario. You've got a table. You're backing up everything locally, right? And you've got a table, the same thing that hasn't been backed up in a couple hours, or we'll say the database, but you're only really worried about this table, right? And you can't lose any data, okay? And I go in there and shove an ice pick through the hard drive of that server. Sometimes the answer is no, bro. Right?
Working on resume?
Yeah. I'll be working on it from handcuffs, but I'm just saying, sometimes you just can't do it. If the data is that important to you and you haven't backed up in a couple hours, the data is not that important to you. Put your money where your mouth is. Okay, quiz time. Disk space wise, because I hear this a lot, right? Is it cheaper to take, and I'm talking about on a really, really busy system, right? Is it cheaper to take a lot of log backups, like say every 10, 15 minutes, every 5 or 15 minutes, or once every hour, once every 4 hours, once every 6 hours? Size-wise on disk, which one is going to be more efficient to you? Because a lot of people really revolve their log backup strategy around that, right?
The farther they are apart, theoretically, the more efficient you're using your space. Because there's always some slop in there that's the whole VLFs and what's left.
Sure. The header info and all that kind of
you
stuff,
always
right?
have that stuff. So if you're doing it every 15 minutes, like for a while I was doing it every 15 minutes all night long, there were no changes, and I get the same information, 24 times overnight, right? So I would think that theoretically, the farther you could afford to space them out, the more efficient your backup space is used.
Okay. Anybody else?
That's a usage pattern. I'd go for a lot of littles just because you're making smaller writes. Lots of them, but smaller.
So
I thought the argument was how much
Taking a long
uses
is
data
better.
space.
I'd say the difference is negligible.
exactly, it's negligible, guys. If you've got 2 gigs of changes an hour, it doesn't matter if you've got 2 gigs spread across 100 files or 2 files. It's still 100 gigs of changes. Officially, you will have some overhead, but it's negligible, right? If you've got that kind of changes, you're not managing your disk down to the byte.
But you didn't ask practicality. You
No,
said
I did say which is the most efficient, right?
so. Therefore, it is.
But negligibly, right? And I did say officially, academically, you're right? I did say that, right? I didn't say the word academic, but academically, you are right. But it's so negligible. Who cares? I can't say that. Negligible. But who cares, right? So that's one. I mean, I think I bring that one point to DBAs more often in discussions like this. And they'll sit there and argue with me and argue with me and argue with me. I'm like, dude, take a Word doc that's 60 pages and break it up into 60 Word docs. It's gonna be that much bigger, big deal. Because the amount of information is still the same, and now we're just arguing over a little bit of metadata. So don't let that drive your backups. So back up every 10 minutes. So anybody else? How are the rest of you managing your your failed and missed backups. And are you querying for missed backups?
We're doing, we're logging all the backup operations and to locally and then copy them up to
Okay, and how do you copy them to the central box? I'm just asking.
link servers.
I'm sorry? Link servers?
To every server.
Okay, you owe me 2 books. One for each word in linked servers.
I didn't design it.
Fair enough. I'll expect those next month. I've given you books before, haven't I? Yeah, I want them back. Okay. Anybody else? How else is anybody else doing it? Is anybody not pulling their data to a central box?
Personally,
Well, not personally, but you as in your organization. I expect you personally to do it. That's been outsourced. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, we're at the mercy of an outsource.
Tell me it's not Perot.
Not that, well, it could be.
Oh, okay.
HP, so it could be Perot subcontract.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, yeah.
Don't trust your
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, well.
Anything else? Yes?
I only have 3 servers, so I check them. I don't have 500 servers or whatever to worry about.
Okay, and that's really okay. So he said he's only got 3 servers, and I know everybody heard that, but I'm mainly repeating that for the folks at home.
I use agent orders.
So even on 3 servers, I am so lazy. I don't even want to go through 3 servers, right? I want it given to me, and in case I pick up 4, I just add it to the list, and it just picks it up, and it just moves, right? I'm doing all mine in PowerShell, but I've got the same kind of collections. I'm going out every 15 minutes on my gold servers, because I think we talked about service levels in like the 2nd class, right? Didn't we? Gold, silver, bronze, and mud. And we talk about the service levels, right? So gold level servers are obviously your top level, gets you out of bed, brings you back from lunch, keeps you from going to lunch, keeps you from getting the kids from school on time, those level of servers, right? So there's a problem with a gold level server. You drop what you're doing right now and you fix that problem, right? Silver, sometime in the next 6 hours or so, right? Bronze, sometime before, more or less this time tomorrow. Mud, just sinks on its own.
Are those levels officially recognized by anybody outside of IT, or is it pretty much just for your own rating system?
That's my own rating system. So they're recognized by everybody. So if we have mud servers that we leave to just kind of sync on their own, why do we even monitor mud servers if we're not going to do anything with them?
In case they all of a sudden go up the chain.
Well, they could go up the chain. Right. They could go up the chain, and now we have connections to them, and they're already on our radar, right? But let's say that it's never going to get out there. It's never going to be promoted.
I can't get my inbox down to 0 because Deb keeps emailing me.
Anything else?
Because it's still doing something that somebody needs to get something out of, and that's what
It's an express version on somebody's desktop. Usually is what that is, an express or a dev version or something on somebody's desktop. You had something, Mary?
Yeah, I didn't answer the question. I think that if backup failed, what is the problem in actually manually taking the backup again? Yesterday morning, you just watch the job on the backup job is failed, that you retake manually, or reschedule the job in a morning time and get the backup again.
Yeah, so the question is, if a backup fails and you come in the morning and notice it failed, what's the problem with backing it up manually? I got no problems. Put it in the same location and follow your same naming convention and all that, right? So it doesn't break any of your processes, but there's nothing wrong with taking it manually. The database doesn't know if it was backed up manually or through a job or through an SIS package or a maintenance plan, or actually it knows if it's backed up through a maintenance plan because it's got poison on it. But other than that, what's the question now? What are we talking about now? What was the last question I just...
Mud servers.
Mud servers, yes. So why do we even have MUD servers in our list if we don't care about them?
Licensing?
For completeness. Okay. Well, you don't have to license Express.
Well, no, but developer you do.
So I love this because I get this answer in Kimpo and other stuff all the time. The answer is almost never for completeness. Completeness of what? Just to have a list of, they're all mine.
Achievements. Achievement point.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be the person they come to when the spam hits the fan.
You said the key word.
So you're going to be the one they come to?
Nope, that's several words. Spam. Raise your hand if you remember Slammer.
Oh,
How did Slammer work?
it was email forwarding, wasn't it?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No. It was a memory resident worm that did a DOS against 1434, and basically it sat in memory, generated a bunch of random IPs, and just flooded your network. What happens when something floods a network with a bunch of random IPs? It eventually hits a valid IP and installs itself on that valid IP, which then turns around and does the exact same thing all over the place, right? Which is why it brought down basically the internet, right? And definitely my company, we got hit by it really hard, okay? So why do we want to bother with MUD servers? Because we need to know they're out there. In case something happens, we need to make sure, we need to at least be able to query for what patch levels they're on, for whether or not they have SA passwords, and so on and so on. We need to at least know they're there so that if something like Slammer ever comes out again and we get hit, we know where all of our, even our desktop SQL, because that's one of the big things that killed networks, right, is all those little Express versions, right, out there. Just all over the place, right? Just generating those random IPs and just flooding the whole network with DOS attacks. So you at least need to know they're there so that you have a list of things that you can go and patch if something like that ever happens again. We don't want to get failed backup reports. We don't want to get anything else. We don't care about any of that crap. They will never make our list. But I want them in my list of servers to at least know what I have in my network so that I can patch them if something really, really bad happens.
So in other words, completeness is the answer.
No, completeness is not the answer. Just because you said it again, it is not the answer. No. No. It's a preventative measure. You know, completeness would be I want all of the Exchange servers and IIS servers too that have nothing to do with me. That would be just for completeness, right? I want all the SharePoint servers too. Front-end servers, how's that? Right? That's completeness. This is just smart. Will Slammer ever happen again? Probably not. No. But something like it may. I'm splitting hairs, but yeah. But yeah, it could very possibly happen. We haven't had a serious security threat in SQL in a long time. Brian, you want to transition here real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, do you? Oh, dude. Am I busting your groove? I'll shut up then and get off the stage and let Brian come talk about security. Hey, dude, I've warmed them up for you. All right, I'm done.